My name is Naledi Mfoloe, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the latest edition of the African Diaspora News channel, where we unravel the stories that shape our world and our communities. Now, today we need to talk about something that's become quite a critical issue for us on the continent, which is terrorism and the response from the African Union, right? More specifically, we're going to be discussing the recent comments by Burkina Faso's leader, Ibrahim Traoré, who's demanding answers from the African Union about what they're actually doing to combat terrorism in Africa. Now, this is a topic that hits home for all of us, especially as we watch the security situation deteriorate in many parts of the West Africa and beyond. From Boko Haram in Nigeria to Al-Shabaab in Somalia, to the rising attacks in Sahel, right? Terrorism has become one of Africa's most pressing issues, and yet we're left asking, is the African Union doing enough to protect its citizens? Or is Traore right to actually call them out? Let's watch.
The children of Congo have been dying for years. Several other conflicts, such as in Sudan, exist on the continent. We would have liked to see the African Union generate the forces and all the necessary strategies to support these states so they can regain peace. We won't come here to talk about ourselves in the Sahel. For nearly 10 years, the Sahel has been a theater of international terrorism. But we see no support from these organizations to find a solution to this problem.
Now, let's start with the question Traore actually posed. What exactly is the AU doing to combat terrorism? You see, the AU was established in 2002 with the mission to promote peace, security, and stability on the continent. And in theory, that should mean addressing these threats like terrorism head on. But let's be real. The AU's response has often felt slow, felt fragmented, and at times disjointed. Now, however, I don't want to completely disregard the AU's efforts. They've set up the African Standby Force, which is the ASF, which is a continental peacemaking force meant to intervene in cases of conflict and instability. And they've also worked with international partners like the United Nations and European Union to address terrorism. But I do have to ask, where's the real action? Where's the bold leadership when it comes to protecting African lives from these violent extremists who are ravaging our communities? And for me, as an African, this feels personal. Because I've seen how terrorism has torn families apart and displaced people and destabilized entire regions. Take what's happening in Sahel region, for example. Countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger are grappling with increased terrorist activity. And yet, we hear so little about the coordinated efforts from the AU to provide unified response. Because why does it feel like the AU is more focused on diplomatic chatter than on real, tangible issues? And Ibrahim Traoré is absolutely right to question the AU's commitment, because as leaders, we should be able to stand up for our people and to be proactive instead of reactive. And Traoré himself has made it clear that Burkina Faso can no longer wait for the international community to come and save them. They're taking matters in their own hands and actually working with local military and relying on their own resources to fight back. And honestly, it's quite a shame that African countries feel the need to do this because they're not getting enough support from the continental body.
Rural Tillaberi has become a no-go zone for many. ISIS and Al-Qaeda affiliated groups are driving thousands of Nigerians from their homes. Their attacks, researchers say, have surged by over 20% in 2024 compared to last year.
Chimchimi. I couldn't even tell you how many people from our community have been killed to this day. In our area, it started with them demanding our livestock. My family and I decided to leave early. After we left, much worse attacks occurred.
Livestock farming and fishing are the backbone of livelihoods in this region. They have completely stopped in some areas. Displaced people seeking refuge on city outskirts rely on state support and the uneven presence of NGOs.
Before insecurity forced us to take refuge here, we used to grow millet. Some of our children were involved in trade, and others even went to look for gold. After the rainy season, we could grow beans, cassava, and also maize.
The economic slowdown fuels a vicious cycle. Terrorist groups take advantage of the growing poverty in the Sahel to recruit new members. The only solution to break out of this spiral is the development of the affected areas.
We need to think about both security and development, to establish development and meet the needs of populations that are experiencing extreme inequality and poverty. The security response must go in hand with development initiatives.
Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger pinned their hopes on their alliance of Sahel states to deliver a military and economic solution, but progress has been limited so far.
And let's talk about the AU's response to the security situation in Sahel. What have they done? They've condemned the violence, yes, but where's the on-the-ground intervention? Why does it feel like our continent is forever waiting for the United Nations or the West to step in and do something? If the AU can't secure peace and protect Africans from terrorism, then what is its purpose? And let's not even get into the question of resources, because we know many African countries are still struggling with their own economic challenges. But terrorism thrives in environments where states are weak or divided. And if African Union is truly serious about combating terrorism, then they need to invest in strengthening African governments and building security institutions and actually fostering collaboration between member states. And my real issue here is that Africa's security challenges are still being treated as someone else's problem rather than an existential threat to the entire continent. And that's where the AU is falling short, because instead of a united, forceful response, we're seeing fragmented efforts like the G5 Sahel Force, which, while well-intentioned, is not enough to handle the scale of the problem. I believe it's time for a change. We need the AU to be more than just a body that issues statements. We need bold and concrete action. The time for talking and waiting is over. If African leaders are serious about protecting their people, then they need to start acting with urgency that the situation actually demands. Because terrorism is not a problem that can be solved with diplomacy alone. It requires decisive and swift action. So, to answer the question, is Traore right to call them out? Absolutely. His words are a wake-up call for all of us. Because I believe it's time that the African leaders take charge of their own destiny. What do you think? Is the AU doing enough to combat the terrorism on the continent? Or are we just stuck in a cycle of empty promises? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. And while you're at it, let's keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for watching.